The sound of the doorbell echoed through my old Victorian house while I was watering my begonias. When I opened the door, I found a man in a sharp suit holding a black folder. His smile never reached his eyes. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get access to more stories like this. Senora Oliveira, I'm here from the Maple Creek Homeowners Association. This is an official notice of a lien on your property. I was frozen as he handed me a stamped document. Before I could say anything, he was already walking back to his shiny BMW. I looked down at the paper in my hands. A $15,000 lien for repeated violations of community rules. My 150-year-old house, passed down through 5 generations, now had a legal threat hanging over it like a dark cloud. My family built this house in 1873, long before gated communities or HOAs existed in this area. When the Maple Creek neighborhood was established around my property 10 years ago, the developer assured me I'd be exempt from the HOA rules since my house predated the development by more than a century. The first letters started coming in 6 months ago. First, complaints about my herb garden out front, unapproved vegetation. Then, notices about the uneven paint on my porch. The original stone structure, with its carved columns, just didn't fit the cookie-cutter aesthetic of the community. Every letter I ignored led to a fine. Every fine I refused to pay would double in value. My mistake was thinking they were just bugging me. I didn't realize they were building a case. Last month, Raymond Garrison, the HOA president and owner of the city's largest construction company, offered to fix my financial problems by buying my property for about 1/3 of its market value. When I politely declined, his smile vanished. "You're gonna regret that," he muttered before walking off. Raymond wasn't just the HOA president, he practically ran the town. His construction firm, Garrison Developments, built half of the downtown commercial buildings. His wife ran the only local newspaper, and his brother was the head of the urban planning department. At 62, Raymond had immaculately styled silver hair and wore custom-tailored suits. There was something predatory in his piercing blue eyes. At the HOA meetings I started going to, just to figure out what was happening, he dominated the room with unquestionable authority. The other board members just nodded along like puppets at every word he said. "Uniformity is what preserves our property values," was his mantra. "Anything out of place hurts everyone." I later found out from Sophia, my neighbor in House 43, that Raymond planned to build a luxury shopping center right where my house stood. My property was the only obstacle to his new multi-million-dollar project. "He tried that before," Sophia whispered during our chat at the supermarket, nervously looking around. "The Martinez family resisted for 2 years until the fines ruined them. They lost everything." The morning after receiving the lien, I woke up to the sound of heavy equipment. I rushed to the window and saw the unthinkable. A landscaping company truck working for the HOA parked in front of my house. 2 men were uprooting my century-old medicinal plants, some of which were rare species my great-grandmother had brought from Portugal. I ran out, still in my pajamas, shouting for them to stop. One of the men, without missing a beat, handed me another document. "Order to fix all violations," signed by the entire board. While I was arguing with them, I noticed Raymond watching everything from his silver Lexus parked on the corner. When our eyes met, he just smiled and nodded, as if we were having a friendly chat. That afternoon, I received a notice for a court hearing next week. The HOA was asking for permission to remedy all pending violations, which, according to the petition, included demolishing the unauthorized addition. Actually, the original kitchen of the house, built in 1890. What Raymond didn't know was that I wasn't just the heir to an old house. I studied real estate law and had built my career on historic preservation cases before retiring to take care of the family property. For years, I had meticulously kept every document related to my property: the original deed, construction records, and the exemptions granted when the community was built. Most importantly, I had documented every interaction with the HOA from day one. That night, I opened the basement and removed loose floorboards. In the secret compartment my grandfather built during the Great Depression to stash his savings, I now kept something equally valuable: certified copies of all the legal documents, including the agreement Raymond had signed 10 years ago, ensuring my property would be exempt from the HOA rules because of its historic value. There was also something Sophia didn't know. My godson, Lucas, was the personal assistant to Mayor James Montgomery, who happened to be a passionate advocate for the city's historic preservation. And the next morning, Mayor Montgomery was scheduled for a surprise meeting with Raymond Garrison to discuss some irregularities in the recent approvals of his projects. I was momentarily paralyzed when I heard a voice over the sound system, but I quickly pulled myself together and walked over to the closet in the entry hall. With trembling hands, I punched in the code on the keypad hidden behind one of my grandmother's paintings. The closet door slid open silently, revealing my surveillance system. "Defense system activated," I announced, pressing the red button. A soft hum ran through the house as small cameras emerged from the window and ceiling frames. I had installed this system right after receiving the first veiled threat from the HOA 3 months ago. My friend Cameron, an investigative journalist, warned me about how the Sunshine Valley HOA had pulled similar stunts on other owners of historic houses in the area. The live stream started automatically on my social media channels, as programmed. "This is going to document everything," I murmured to myself, watching the monitors as Caldwell and his thugs approached the front door. "Mrs. Bennett, this is your last chance to open the door and discuss this like civilized adults," Caldwell shouted. "Like civilized adults?" I replied over the intercom. "Is that what you call putting an illegal lien on my property and then showing up with a moving truck without any warning?" My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed steady. The cameras caught every movement while the viewer counter on my monitors showed hundreds of people watching the live stream. "Your house is violating 17 HOA codes and you ignored all our notices," Caldwell responded. "The board voted unanimously to exercise our acquisition clause." I laughed bitterly. "How convenient, since my house isn't even in your HOA's jurisdiction. This house was built in 1875, almost a century before your association even existed." Outside, I saw Caldwell gesture to his crew. One of them, wearing a vest with the Sunshine Valley HOA logo, tried to force open the side window. "I'm officially warning you that you're attempting to break into a private property," I declared loudly for the record. "My house is being streamed live to over." I glanced at the counter. 700 people right now. Caldwell hesitated for a second, but his arrogance won out. "No one cares about an old lady causing trouble. We have every legal right to take over this property because of all the accumulated violations. Please, list out those violations," I calmly requested, making sure everything was recorded. "Unauthorized painting, improper fences, unapproved landscaping, unsanctioned exterior decorations." He began to list. "Interesting," I interrupted, "since, as I've explained multiple times, my property isn't part of your HOA. I have the original 1875 documents and all the subsequent records to prove it." One of the guys managed to open the kitchen window. The alarm immediately went off. "Intrusion detected. Activating perimeter defense," the automated system announced. The sprinklers built into the kitchen ceiling went off, but it wasn't regular water. It was a non-toxic stun solution my nephew, who works in corporate security, had installed. The man who broke into my kitchen staggered backwards, coughing with tearful eyes. "What the heck is this?" yelled Caldwell, backing up a few steps. "Just a modern security system," I replied calmly. "Totally legal and non-lethal. Unlike your attempt to steal my house." The viewer counter on my monitors now showed over 2,000 people. Outraged comments were rapidly rolling in on the side screen. "You're all witnessing how the Sunshine Valley HOA is trying to illegally seize a historic house that isn't even under their jurisdiction," I said directly into the main camera. "They put a fraudulent lien on my property after I refused to pay fees for an association I never joined." Caldwell looked like he was finally realizing the mess he had gotten himself into. His face turned red when he saw the cameras pointed at him. "Shut off those cameras immediately," he demanded. "You don't have permission to film us." "Actually, I have every right to film people trying to break into my property," I responded. "And speaking of permissions, do you have any court order to be here?" He fell silent for a moment, then turned to his crew. "Let's go check the paperwork in the office." But it was too late to back off quietly. A siren sounded in the distance, rapidly approaching. "Looks like some viewers called the cops," I commented. Panic spread across Caldwell's face as 2 police cars pulled up in front of my house, lights flashing. But what really made him pale was the black sedan that parked right behind. The sedan door opened, and out stepped Mayor Richardson, with a downright unfriendly look on his face. "Mr. Caldwell," the mayor said in a clear, firm voice as he walked toward the group, "can you tell me exactly what's going on here?" Cameron appeared behind the mayor with his journalist gear, capturing every moment. My loyal friend had kept his promise to bring backup. The police started questioning the HOA men while I watched on the monitors, my heart still racing but now with a growing sense of relief. The viewer count had passed 5,000. "Mr. Mayor, we're just following the HOA regulations," Caldwell tried to explain, his previous confidence completely gone. This property has multiple violations, and this property, the mayor interrupted, has been listed on the National Register of Historic Places since 1978 and is explicitly excluded from your HOA's jurisdiction in the founding document you signed 15 years ago. I watched through the external camera as Caldwell gulped. The other HOA men began to slowly back away, like rats fleeing a sinking ship. There must be some misunderstanding, Caldwell stammered. In fact, the mayor agreed. It looks like this misunderstanding includes forged documents, attempted break-in, and possible real estate fraud. I'm sure the district attorney will be very interested in discussing this with you. The police began taking statements from the HOA men as the mayor motioned for me to come outside. I hesitated briefly before deactivating my defense system and opening the front door. Mrs. Bennett, the mayor extended his hand. I'm very sorry about this whole situation. Cameron explained everything to me on the way. I shook his hand, still a little shaking. Thank you for coming, Mayor Richardson. I've been trying to protect this house for months. Cameron stepped up with his camera gear. I got everything on video for our special segment on HOA abuses. And your live stream already has over 10,000 views. One of the officers approached. Ma'am, we'd like to see those documents you mentioned that prove your property isn't under the HOA's jurisdiction. Of course, I replied, relieved that the authorities were finally willing to look at the evidence. I have all the original records, including the 1875 deed, the historic preservation documents from 1978, and the letter from the Urban Planning Department confirming that my property is exempt from HOA control. As I led them inside, I glanced back at Caldwell being questioned while he leaned against a police cruiser. His empire was crumbling right before our eyes. In the living room, I spread the documents out on the coffee table for the mayor and the officers to see. As you can see, when the Sunshine Valley HOA was established in 2010, all historic properties in the area were given specific exemptions. It's clearly stated on page 7 of the founding document. The mayor examined the papers and nodded. This is pretty conclusive. Your house was never under the HOA's jurisdiction. So why did they keep sending me violation notices and eventually put a lien on my property? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Cameron jumped in. Because your 150-year-old house sits on an acre of land in one of the city's most sought-after neighborhoods. The land itself is worth millions. And it turns out that Horizon Partners, the development company that recently proposed a new luxury condo in the area, has as its main investor Mr. Caldwell's brother-in-law, added the mayor, flipping through some notes that Cameron had given him. One of the officers jotted down the information. That adds a possible motive for the fraudulent takeover. They've been trying to force me out for months, I explained. First came aggressive letters about supposed violations. Then, HOA-affiliated neighbors started complaining about my old-fashioned garden and the out-of-place look of my house. Finally, they began imposing daily fines that built up until they used it as a pretext for the lien. Well, this intimidation ends today, declared the mayor. Officer Jenkins, please make sure that lien is removed immediately. With pleasure, Mr. Mayor, replied the officer as he scribbled notes. Cameron adjusted his camera. Mrs. Bennett, could you give a statement for our report on how you feel right now? I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. I feel vindicated, but I'm also worried about how many other people might be going through something similar, without the means or connections to defend themselves. This house has been in my family for 5 generations. It's not just a property, it's my heritage, my history. I looked out the window and saw Caldwell gesturing angrily as he talked on the phone. HOAs were meant to keep the community standards up, not to become tools for intimidation and seizure. I hope what happened today serves as a wake-up call for associations abusing their power. The mayor nodded approvingly. I plan to initiate a full review of all HOA practices in our city. Unfortunately, this isn't an isolated case. Cameron has shown me a concerning pattern. While we were talking, I noticed a sleek car pulling up across the street. A man in a suit got out and observed the scene for a moment before making a phone call. Looks like the HOA lawyer just arrived, I commented, recognizing him from previous meetings. Great timing, said Cameron with a smile. Now he can see firsthand how his client is getting hauled off. Sure enough, after the initial questioning, the police were now handcuffing Caldwell, reading his rights as they placed him in the back of a cruiser. The lawyer hurried across the street, but was intercepted by the mayor before he could interfere. Mr. Davis, I presume, said the mayor. I suggest you talk to your client at the station. He'll be facing charges for attempted break-in, document forgery, and possibly real estate fraud. The lawyer visibly paled. There must be some mistake. The Sunshine Valley HOA strictly operates within the law. Fortunately, I replied, pointing at the cameras, we have everything documented to prove otherwise. 3 days after the incident, my kitchen still had a faint smell of that defensive spray, even with all the windows open. I was making tea when the doorbell rang. Checking my newly installed security monitor, I saw a middle-aged woman with perfectly styled gray hair and an impeccable blue suit. Next to her was a young assistant carrying a bulky folder. I opened the door cautiously, keeping the security chain on. Mrs. Bennett, I'm Evelyn Morris, Chief Attorney for the Sunshine Valley HOA. She handed me her business card through the door opening. We need to talk about recent events. I examined the card. Morris & Associates, Real Estate and Corporate Law, a prestigious downtown firm. Any communication should go through my lawyer, I replied, about to close the door. Mrs. Bennett, her voice remained calm. I come with a settlement proposal. I'm not here to threaten you. I hesitated. My family's history with the HOA didn't inspire much trust, but curiosity got the better of me. I'll hear you out. In the garden, I finally decided. We sat in the century-old gazebo, under the shade of an oak that my great-grandfather had planted. Evelyn's assistant set up a digital recorder on the antique wooden table while she arranged some documents. First off, the HOA board would like to sincerely apologize for Mr. Caldwell's inappropriate behavior, she began, handing me an official-looking document. Apologies for attempted break-in and document forgery? I asked, flipping through the formal letter. This looks more like an effort to avoid a devastating lawsuit. Evelyn kept her face calm, but her eyes were calculating every move. Mr. Caldwell's actions were indefensible and completely unauthorized by the entire board. He acted on his own, abusing his position. Interesting, I commented, taking a sip of tea. Did the other 3 HOA uniformed guys also act on their own? They were directly hired by Mr. Caldwell, not by the association, she immediately replied. The Sunshine Valley HOA is just as shocked as you are by these actions. A little bird landed on the nearby water fountain, its chirping oddly contrasting with our tense conversation. My video clearly shows the HOA's official crest on the uniforms and the truck, I pointed out. The same crest that's on this apology document. Evelyn cleared her throat, visibly uncomfortable. That's exactly why we're here. The unauthorized use of the association's resources by Mr. Caldwell puts us in a legally vulnerable position. Finally, something we both agree on, I replied. The board is ready to offer a generous settlement, she continued, signaling to her assistant, who slid another document toward me. Permanent removal of the lien, financial compensation for emotional distress, and a written guarantee that your property remains, as it always has been, exempt from the HOA regulations. I examined the document in detail. It looked complete and advantageous at first glance. $175,000 in compensation, formal recognition of my property's historic exemption, and a commitment to never bother me again. And in return, I asked, already knowing the answer. Complete confidentiality about the incident and a waiver of any civil or criminal lawsuits against the association or its representatives. Including Caldwell? Mr. Caldwell is no longer part of the association, Evelyn replied. His resignation was accepted yesterday. What he faces criminally is a separate matter between him and the state. I flipped through the agreement again, weighing the implications. The financial compensation would finally allow me to completely restore the original roof, a project I had been postponing for years because of the costs. I need to check with my lawyer, I finally declared. Of course, Evelyn agreed, discreetly checking her watch. But I must inform you that this offer expires in 48 hours. The board is eager to resolve this quickly. Bet that's true, I murmured, especially with Cameron's special report scheduled to air next week. A shadow of concern crossed Evelyn's face. So you know about that, she concluded. Suburban tyranny, the power of HOAs. It's going to be a 1-hour special on WQNX, I confirmed. Cameron has interviewed dozens of victims of similar abuses all over the region. Evelyn's assistant was frantically typing on his tablet, probably taking notes or sending urgent messages. The offer could be adjusted to include your participation in reforming the HOA policies, Evelyn suggested, clearly improvising. Your knowledge on historic preservation would be invaluable to our new Heritage Committee. I couldn't help but laugh incredulously. Yesterday, I was a threat to the aesthetic integrity of the community, and today, I'm considered a valuable expert? The association's priorities are evolving, she replied diplomatically. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Cameron. Don't sign anything. The state TV reporter wants to interview you live tomorrow. I'm gonna need more time to think over your offer, I announced as I stood up. My lawyer is out of town until Wednesday. Evelyn also stood up, smoothing out her impeccable suit. We can extend the deadline to 72 hours, but the board is eager to move on. I guess so, I replied, walking them back to the front gate. It must be tough trying to sell houses in a community where the HOA is out to steal properties. On the sidewalk, a black car pulled up smoothly. The rear door opened, revealing a figure I immediately recognized. Eleanor Pritchard, the billionaire developer behind half of the region's luxury projects. "Mrs. Bennett," Eleanor called from the car window. "Would you have a moment for me?" Evelyn and her assistant froze, clearly surprised by the unexpected appearance. "Looks like I have another appointment," I commented. "I'll wait for a call from your office regarding the extended deadline." As Evelyn and her assistant hurriedly walked away, Eleanor got out of the car. Tall, elegant, and radiating unquestionable authority at 68, she approached with a diplomatic smile. "Your house is even more impressive in person," she remarked, admiring the Victorian architecture. "A true historic gem." "A gem that your business partner tried to steal," I shot back. Eleanor raised her perfectly shaped eyebrows. "Ex-partner, to be precise. I terminated all contracts with Caldwell's company this morning." The meeting with Eleanor Pritchard lasted 2 hours. Sitting in my living room, surrounded by photos of 5 generations of my family in the same house, we discussed not only the HOA incident, but the future of the entire neighborhood. My mistake was letting Caldwell and his associates manage development without proper oversight, Eleanor admitted, as she examined an old photo of the house in its early years. Pritchard Developments has always valued historic preservation. Our mission is to blend the new with the old, not destroy it. "Nice words," I commented, pouring more tea. "But it was your investments that funded the Sunshine Valley expansion." Eleanor nodded, surprising me with her frankness. "And that's exactly why I'm here in person. Not to offer empty apologies, but to propose a solid solution." She opened her Italian leather folder and pulled out a detailed blueprint. Contrary to what I expected, another development plan, it was a historic preservation project. Sunshine Valley was built around 3 historic properties, including yours, she explained, pointing at the map. My new proposal transforms these properties into the cultural heart of the neighborhood, not obstacles to be removed. I examined the drawings with initial skepticism that slowly turned into curiosity. The plan preserved all 3 historic houses, surrounding them with a community park, with plaques explaining the history of the area. "The HOA will never accept this," I commented. "It goes against everything they stand for: uniformity, control, exclusivity." Eleanor smiled with the calm confidence only billionaires seem to have. "The HOA won't have a choice. I bought the majority stake in the development this morning. The board will be completely restructured next week." I set my teacup on the table, trying to process this twist. "Why?" I finally asked. "Why care about 3 old houses when you're building skyscrapers?" "Because I lost my own childhood home to a necessary development when I was 12, she replied, her voice softening for the first time. "And because your video of resisting those thugs was viewed almost 1,000,000 times in 3 days. She got up and walked toward the window, looking out at the garden where generations of my family had played, celebrated, and cried. "Public opinion and historic preservation rarely line up so perfectly," she continued. "This is a unique moment to redefine how our communities grow, respecting the past while building the future." That night, after Eleanor left, I sat on the porch with Cameron, who came over to discuss the interview for the next day. "I don't trust her," Cameron stated, studying the blueprints Eleanor had left behind. "People like Pritchard don't change overnight. She's just steering the narrative." "Maybe," I agreed, rocking in the chair that had belonged to my grandmother. "But if it means my house stays intact and the other historic properties are preserved too, maybe it's a start." Cameron's phone buzzed with a notification. "The video surpassed 1,000,000 views," he announced. "The hashtag #HOA Suburban Tyranny is trending nationwide." "It's crazy to think my little personal battle turned into something this big," I reflected. "It's not just personal," Cameron corrected. "We're hearing from people all over the country facing similar situations. You've become a symbol of resistance against corporate abuse disguised as community rules." As the sun set, casting long shadows over the lawn, I noticed an unfamiliar car slowly driving by the house, the 3rd one that afternoon. "Looks like you've got fans," Cameron commented. "Or the HOA still isn't completely giving up," I replied, feeling less worried than I had a few days ago. My phone rang. It was an unknown number with a Washington, D.C. area code. "Hello? Mrs. Bennett, this is Senator Alvarez." I saw your video and I'd like to talk about including your testimony in the upcoming HOA reform hearings. Would you be interested? I looked over at Cameron, who motioned enthusiastically for me to accept. I'd definitely be interested, Senator, I replied. This battle is just getting started. After hanging up, I realized that the fight for my century-old house had become something much bigger. The lien was just the first move in a much more complex game for the future of American residential communities. The next morning, I found another notice pinned to my gate. Not from the HOA, but from the State Historic Preservation Department, confirming the start of the process to elevate my property's protection to the highest level allowed by law. As I tore the paper off to read it more closely, I noticed Eleanor Pritchard across the street, talking with architects and pointing at the other historic houses in the neighborhood. Our eyes met briefly, not as allies, not as enemies, but as cautious players on a board where the rules were being rewritten. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get access to more stories like this. The house that 5 generations of my family had protected was safe for now. But as my grandmother always said, freedom isn't inherited permanently. It's defended every day, and I was ready to continue that fight, one day at a time.